Everybody ready? Okay. Good morning, everyone. For months, Governor DeSantis and his administration have been launching a full-out assault on our schools, on our students and our teachers, on safety, on science, and just overall common sense. First, he issued an unconstitutional ban on school mask requirements, flying in the face of science and safety. Then, when brave school board officials stood up against the government overreach to put the safety of their students and their staff first, he had his Department of Education threaten them. When local officials stood up to this bullying and still moved forward doing what is right for their students, even in the face of these threats, DeSantis' Department of Education punished them personally and financially. I've been proud to stand with our school officials on the right side of this fight and have been letting them know that we have had their back, including calling on the White House to intervene. And they heard our call. When President Biden and the U.S. Department of Education making it very clear that they had the backs of our school boards, providing assistance to fill the gaps due to the financial retribution by the state. But instead of letting this wrong-headed fight go, the DeSantis administration is going to new extremes to defund the school districts that don't go along with their dangerous policy and bullying. As of this decision made by DeSantis' Board of Education yesterday to enact financial sanctions on 8 school districts wasn't extreme enough, they are launching a further political crusade to negate any federal assistance they have or may receive from President Biden's administration. A judge has already ruled that the initial sanctions were unconstitutional not once, but twice. And ahead of yesterday's meeting, the U.S. Department of Education raised legal concerns with the DeSantis administration's interference with federal grant funding. So today, I am calling on the White House and the U.S. Department of Education to use the full weight of the federal government to stop the DeSantis administration from defunding our schools. Unfortunately, this is not an isolated attack on schools and students by the DeSantis administration, but is part of a troubling trend by the governor. We have been calling for months on the governor to bring down $2.3 billion in federal school funding allocated to Florida, and this week he finally submitted a plan for this funding after continuing to be called out for being the only state to not have done so. $2.3 billion. That was roughly $801 per student across the entire state. And the governor was just going to walk away from this money. And then on top of it, there is still roughly $8 billion in federal school funding that the state has already received, but has barely tapped into even as our schools are desperate in needing of funding. So let me be clear. These efforts to defund schools impact not only school officials, but also teachers, school meal providers, bus drivers, and most importantly, our students. And the DeSantis administration has also been negligent on our school children when it comes to another issue, school nutrition and nutrition assistance. Along with our calls on the school aid that finally resulted in action this week, we have been calling on for months of the DeSantis administration to apply for the $820 million in available federal supplemental child nutrition assistance from the summer months. This program was at no cost to the state and helps feed more than 2.7 million Florida children. Again, our calls resulted in action when the DeSantis administration finally applied for this funding, which turned out topped $1 billion in supplemental nutrition assistance. And we are already calling on them to apply for this program for the current school year that is now available, as the DeSantis administration has yet to say when or even if they intend to apply. I am hopeful, but not optimistic, that the governor will instruct his administration to do so without delay. But we are ready to continue to keep up the pressure and get the results for Florida families, for our schools, for our students, and for our teachers. We are so thankful that the federal government has continued to step up in the face of the failures of the DeSantis administration. And we hope to see this federal support continue now when we need it most, as the DeSantis administration launches new assaults against our schools. Governor DeSantis, stop playing politics with our schools, with the nutrition of our students, with the safety of our teachers, with these dollars. The only reason why we are the only state that has not applied for this funding is because he's in a war with President Biden. That is so short-sighted for what is needed here in the state of Florida. Put aside the bickering, put aside the political gamesmanship. Let's work together to feed our kids, to keep our schools open, and to make sure that they are being funded. Funding education is a legal issue. Funding it to its capacity is a moral issue. Stop playing games. Let's do this right. Let's do this for our kids and for the future of our state. I'd be happy to take questions.
On the subject of federal aid to school districts, it sounded like your request was for the federal government to block the state from withholding funds and an amount equal to what the federal government would provide to the school districts. Enforcement-wise, how would the federal government go about doing it?
Well, and I think I just want to make sure that I'm answering your question correctly. So basically, the way, from my understanding, that it has worked is that the federal government has created a grant program that these school districts have been able to apply for. And so we know that 2 of the counties, already Alachua and Broward, have received federal dollars down. And from the conversations and rulings from yesterday, they are now going to withhold that equivalent amount. And from the conversations that I have seen with attorneys that are representing the school districts, as well as the U.S. Department of Education, that money with the grants, that there may be some federal laws and federal statutes that may be violated. I certainly have not done my own personal legal research into that, but that is at least what attorneys that I have spoken to that are on these cases, as well as the U.S. Department of Education.
And how would you respond to the Commissioner's point yesterday that we'll have no control over our own school districts if we let the federal government do this?
The federal government sends down money all the time. And so giving money to our school districts and going through grants, first of all, I didn't know that we were in a fight over control. Let's start there. That the control belongs to the duly elected school board members. That is what their constitutional obligation is to deal with the safety of our kids inside the schools and provide an educational environment. While there is regulatory and there's policy oversight from the Department of Education, at the end of the day, the control currently and has always resided with the school boards. So this government overreach that they are playing around with right now is just that, overreach. It is unconstitutional, and he should not be playing with this game. This is not about control. This is about providing a safe environment for our children and making sure that our schools are open, that kids are in the classrooms, and that it's being done in a safe environment.
Do you think he's making the case for an elected education commissioner?
Yes. I mean, look, we used to have one. That used to be part of our Constitution. And I think the more members of the cabinet that are up here that have independently elected, that can't be influenced, because education belongs to all of us. And to have a duly elected Commissioner of Education might be the right path for the state of Florida based on the fact of what we have seen during the DeSantis administration.
And would you support that if you became governor? Because it would intrude on your power, I believe.
Governing isn't supposed to be about power. Governing is supposed to be about doing good and giving back to the state and being a true public servant. And if we all care about education, then that might be the right path. It's not about power, it's not about retaining power, it's about what's doing right for the citizens of our state and our children.
Do you think just one last question, the 6 school boards that have filed a lawsuit basically claiming the Department of Health has no authority to issue the order they issued, how do you think that is going to play out in the end, and what is the next step, do you think?
I was actually with one of those attorneys yesterday talking about what's next, what's going to happen next, how many times are we going to keep going back and forth between the state and the federal government in these lawsuits. I mean, I certainly know that I won't get a public records response to this, but we certainly should be looking into how much money have we been spending on lawsuits for the last couple of years in this administration. And the back and forth, all that's doing is hurting our kids. They're the ones who are in the crosshairs of this back and forth. It is heartbreaking to watch, and certainly hope that, first of all, we certainly hope that the numbers come down, that this fight doesn't need to happen. Once our numbers come down, once we stabilize, and we see that we're really out of risk. The bickering back and forth has got to stop. We all should have the same priorities. That's funding our education system, making sure that our kids are being taught, and we have a problem right now. We have a huge vacancies with our teachers, with our substitute teachers, and with this fighting keep going on, we're going to have problems continuing to hire additional faculty and staff and bus drivers. We need to be working together and not bickering over funding, and bring the money down from the federal government. Stop defunding our schools. Let our teachers and our school boards go back to what they love doing. It's being in the classroom, talking about the good things of our public education system. And this has really been just heartbreaking to watch because we're talking about masks. We're talking about masking, for our children, that just to keep them safe, and more importantly, to keep our teachers safe. That so many of our teachers are vulnerable, and they've been going out day in and day out, coming to school every single day, knowing that they can get sick, but they love their jobs, and they're willing to be there. We got to respect them, we got to support them, we got to keep them safe.
What the state did last time was it was on the eve of a hearing of the administrative challenge the districts that filed based on the previous rule, so they changed the rule. There's really nothing to stop the state, for the Department of Health, from doing that again, is there?
No, and that's what I'm talking about, this gamesmanship. If you really cared about the welfare of our education system, if you really cared about the people of our state, stop playing these games. If you're not correct and you're not right and you have overstepped, admit that. Move on. Let the fight go away. But the fact is that they continue to change the game, continue to move the ball. It only reinforces that this is a political game that is happening with the Department of Education and Commissioner Corcoran's office and DeSantis' office. This is a game to them, and this is certainly not a game that we want to play, and hopefully they will understand that the people of the state are not with them on this issue. Okay. Thank you.